the next thing we're going to talk about, the next way that we're going to talk about in finding our x-intercept is using the quadratic formula. You'll need to become familiar with this because it will not be given to you on a test. You also need to become familiar with what is under the radical, b squared minus 4 times a times c. It is called the discriminant. It will tell you how many solutions, how many x-intercepts you will have, and the type of x-intercept. Okay? As you know from previous studying, we could have one x-intercept, we could have two x-intercepts, and now, as you previously learned, we can have an imaginary or a complex solution. Okay? So let's go ahead and work some examples. Oh, I'm sorry. Here is a chart that will help you determine how many solutions you have based upon your discriminant. Okay? So if your discriminant is greater than 0, you're going to have two complex solutions. And there is an example of the graph there. Okay? If your discriminant is equal to 0, then you will have one real solution. And there's an example of the graph there. Okay? Now, if your discriminant is greater than 0, you're going to have two real solutions. And here is an example of the graph. These graphs should look very familiar to you as we have already studied them. Again, please make sure that you get this chart in your notes. Okay, and become very familiar with it. All right, so our next example, we're going to use the quadratic formula. Again, know it by heart. Negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4 times a times c all over 2a. Okay? The first thing you need to know is your quadratic needs to be in standard form. Okay? So therefore, I'm going to have to subtract 2 from both sides. So now, 3x squared minus 5x minus 2 is equal to 0. Okay? So now, it is in standard form, which is ax squared plus bx plus c. So now, this is our a, our b, and our c. Let's substitute it into the quadratic formula. When I do that, I'm going to get negative times negative 5 plus or minus the square root of negative 5 squared minus 4 times 3 times a negative 2. Okay, and all of this is over 2 times a, and that is 2 times 3. Okay? I do want to remind you that you can still find these solutions by factoring. Okay? This is just another method. You can find it by factoring, or you can use the quadratic formula. And I'm also showing you here how I prefer you to show your work on your paper. You have two negatives here, that is a positive, plus or minus. Okay? Use your calculator, put everything that is under the radical in there, and you should get 49. Okay? And all of this is over 6. Okay? Now, as we know, the square root of 49 is 7. So, this is 5 plus 7 divided by 6. And 5 minus 7 divided by 6. Okay? So, this is 12 divided by 6, and which equals 2. And then we have negative 2 divided by 6, which is a negative 1/3. Okay? These are our solutions. These are where it will cross the x-axis. Okay? I do want to take a minute to look at the discriminant to show you how that works. Remember, the discriminant is b squared minus 4 times a times c. And I'm just going to substitute that as we've already done here, and you will get the square root of 49, okay, which is equal to 7. If you'll look back at your chart, okay, it says if D is your discriminant is greater than 0, that's where you should be looking, and you have two real solutions, and the proof is here because we have two real solutions, which are 2 and negative 1/3. Okay? Our next example, again, it has to be in standard form. So I can subtract 2x from both sides. I think that would be simpler. 2x squared, I'm sorry. Subtract that from both sides. Okay, this is going to be 0 is equal to negative 2x squared minus 6x minus 7. Again, go ahead and identify what A, B, and C is and substitute it into the quadratic formula. When you substitute it, you should get negative 6 plus or minus the square root of 6 squared minus 4 times 2 times 7. It is all over 2 times 2. Okay? Go ahead and simplify that. You should have negative 6 plus or minus the square root of negative 20. All of that is over 4. Okay? Again, you cannot have a negative here under the radical. So we're going to have to get rid of that using the lesson that we just learned for complex solutions. Okay? So you can break it down. Let me do some side work over here. It is, when you break down negative 20, this is negative 1 times the square root of 20. Okay? Which is I times the square root of 20. And go ahead and simplify the square root of 20. Okay? Now, when you simplify this, you're going to get negative 6 plus or minus 2i times the square root of 5, all over 4. Okay? And we're going to leave our answer as that. Okay? Our next example. Again, I'm going to have to add 2x squared because my quadratic has to be in standard form. So 0 is equal to 2x squared plus 4x plus 3. Okay? Let's go ahead and substitute it into the quadratic formula. I'm going to have two negatives here because one negative because B is 4. Okay, plus or minus the square root of B squared minus 4 times 2 times 3. All of this is over 2 times negative, or 2 times 2. Okay? So now, this is negative 4 plus or minus. Okay? Go ahead and put that into your calculator. And you should get negative 8. All of this is over 4. Okay? Simplify the square root of negative 8. Again, because you cannot have a radical under, or negative under the radical sign. Okay? So, when your final solution will be -4 plus or minus 2i times the square root of 2 all over 4. Okay? Next example is 3x squared minus x equals 4. Okay? So I'm going to subtract 4 from both sides because, again, it needs to be in standard form. And I'm going to move this out of the way because there is a glare. All right, so now subtract 4 from both sides. So 3x squared minus x minus 4 is equal to 0. Substitute it into our quadratic formula. This is negative. I've got two negatives this time. Be careful with that. Plus or minus the square root of -1 squared minus 4 times 3 times -4. And all of this is over 2 times a, and a is 3. Okay? Two negatives, let's simplify. Two negatives will equal a positive. Plus or minus, put that in your calculator, and you should get the square root of 49. All over 6. Okay? The square root of 49 is 7. Okay? Again, you can factor this type of problem and still be able to get the same answer. Okay? So now, this is 1 plus 7 divided by 6 and 1 minus 7 divided by 6. Okay? So 1 plus 7 is 8. This is 8 over 6. And 1 minus 7 is 6. I'm sorry, -6. Okay? Simplify those, and your roots, your 0, your solution, your x-intercept is going to be x equals 4/3, and x is equal to -1.